retired U.S. Navy pilot Captain Armen Kurdian with us now to talk about the ongoing threat in the Middle East, beginning with the loss of these 3 Americans. There are questions now, as you have heard, that are swirling around whether or not this drone strike was a defensive failure. What is your assessment so far based on what has been shared publicly?
Good morning, Marni. Well, it's entirely possible when you consider the fact that some of these drones that are returning to these localized bases, they may not even be piloted from that specific location. They could be piloted from a long way away. If that drone wasn't properly squawking, or if the folks there who were manning the limited air defenses didn't have access or information about telemetry from that drone that is coming back, it's entirely possible that if it's just picked up on radar, that it could have been mistaken. So they're going to have to look at their procedures. Sounds to me, really, there's a bit of a communications breakdown in terms of the drone coming back. So the important thing to remember is they only have to be lucky one time. We have to be right every single time to avoid these kinds of attacks and the damage and the death that it's caused.
Yeah, and the repercussions of that, which means the U.S. is keeping retaliation plans close to the vest, but something is likely being planned to respond. How soon do you expect the U.S. to react?
You know, Marni, it's going to depend on the type of target that we choose to hit. Because if you're looking at degrading the ability of these Shiite militia, which are dispersed and metastasized throughout the Middle East like a cancer, literally, that's probably the best way to explain it. You're not going to find big, giant concentrations of 20 or 30 drones in one location. These drones are cheap to manufacture and cheap to operate. So if you're looking at trying to do a large-scale airstrike against a large cache of drones, you're not going to find it. So I would venture to guess you're probably going to see a mixture of drone strikes of our own, which are less expensive for us to actually operate, but also targeting leadership and perhaps some of the command and communication structure. And as I've said repeatedly, we have to go after the money, which is paying for these drones and these missiles that are being shot, including by the Houthi rebels, because until you cut off the spigot of money, they're just going to keep making more. And right now they're spitting them out pretty quickly.
Okay, so we'll get to the money issue in just a second. But first, when you say go after the leadership, are you talking about the leadership of the Islamic resistance who has claimed responsibility? And do we know who they are?
I would very well bet that the U.S. intelligence knows who they are. A lot of these organizations, they act like criminal organizations. They're not so much militia from or military organizations as you and I might think. There is a cost to them, because if you take out several of their soldiers, you take some of their equipment, it's not going to affect them. It's not going to matter to them too much. And to them, or to Iran, they're just expendable tools to be used as part of its larger geopolitical strategy to keep the United States off balance within the Middle East. So without taking out the leadership, that is where the real cost is to these folks. And then you take them out, and perhaps some of the other militia or the lower level individuals who are part of these groups may become a little bit dispirited and then potentially leave. But you have to go after leadership. You have to go after the ones who are actually making these decisions.
Right. And then finally, and I have less than a minute for this, but when you target the money, right, how they're funneling money into the system to create these deadly weapons, what options does the U.S. military have to fight that specific threat? And does that mean Iran?
Honestly, it's more of a State Department and international cooperation with our allies, International Emergency Economic Powers Act, going after, and it's not just going to be Iran. There's going to be probably some oligarchs and some wealthy Middle Easterners, businessmen who are funding these organizations. The money's there. We know where it is. But we need real leadership coming out of our administration to go after this, just maximum sanctions. Go back to what we were doing under President Trump. We should never have released the sanctions like we did at the end of that last administration, the beginning of this one, or else Iran would not have the wherewithal to spend the money and pay for what's actually happening out there right now.
Captain Armen Kurdian, as always, thank you, sir. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.